Fiona's Lace by Patricia Palaco. Many years ago, my father's family lived in a small, poor village a few miles from Limerick in Ireland. Everyone in the village depended on the textile mill that was soon to close. Most of the villagers were unsure of their futures, but Glencarry was their home and all that any of them had ever known. My father's great-grandmother, Fiona, told him later that she and her younger sister, Eilish, used to wait by the front gate almost every day to greet their father as he came home from the mill. Their mother, Annie, was known far and wide for her hearty soups and lovely bread. Supper at the Hughes household was a celebration of good food. But the best part of supper for Fiona and Eilish was to hear their father Mick tell grand stories. "Dad, tell us about how you got Mother to marry you," Fiona whispered. "Oh yes, Dad, tell us," Eilish chirped. Their father's eyes blazed as he began. "Now, you can believe this, or you can believe it not," he started. The girls and their mother leaned in. "Back when your mother and I worked at the textile mill in Limerick, I used to walk by the lace parlor on my way to lunch." He paused. Fiona smiled broadly at Eilish. They knew the story by heart. "This is when I saw the most beautiful little lass I had ever laid my eyes on." "Such talk, Mick. You've been kissing the blarney." Their mother blushed. "So, I asked all the other girls in her parlor where she lived so I could come a-callin' and spark her. But not one of them would tell me. One day, as I left the mill, I noticed a lovely little bunch of lace tied to a bush down the lane. I could see other little bits of lace tied to trees, bushes, front stoops, and lampposts further on. I recognized her lace. So I followed it down the paths and lanes until they stopped just in front of a darling little cottage. I looked further on and saw no more of them, so I knew this was your mother's house." Fiona and Eilish tittered. "'Twasn't more than a fortnight that I started courting your mum. We were married right here at St. Timothy's, and I brought me bride home to this very house. Carried her over that threshold just there," he said with a sweeping gesture. "Both you girls were born right here next to the hearth," their mother added. "To think a trail of lace brought you to our mom," Fiona said dreamily. Then, just as she did every evening, Fiona ran to get her day's handiwork to show her father. Her mother was teaching her to be a fine lace maker. "Mum showed me her secret run-and stitch today," Fiona said proudly as she held a small pillow covered with lace in front of her father's face. "Aye, Fiona, your mother was one of the finest makers of lace in all of Limerick," Father said wistfully as he smiled at her mother. "Sure, the arthritis stopped all that, Mick," Anne said quietly. She tried to smile, but it was heartbreaking to them that Anne's fingers were swollen from the pain. "Fiona will be grander than I ever hoped to be, and as soon as she's old enough, we'll take her to the parlor in Limerick, and she'll be the best," Annie crowed proudly as she inspected her daughter's lace. Times were already hard in all of Ireland, but greater still in Glencarry. The mill closed as rumored. It broke many a man and forced families to leave all they knew and seek work elsewhere. "Where will we go, Mick?" Anne said one day, her heart deeply troubled. One day, their neighbors, Mrs. O'Flaherty, spoke to Anne over the back fence. "My Jocko and I signed a contract. That's all we had to get passage to America," she said as she hung up her wash. "A contract to do what?" Annie asked. "To serve a wealthy family in America. We are going to be domestic service for them." "You mean you'll be their maid?" Annie asked. "Of course, Jocko will help on the grounds. The wealthy family will pay our way there on a ship. All we have to do is promise to work for them until passage is paid off, Mrs. O'Flaherty answered. When Annie told Mick that evening, they stayed up into the wee hours of the night talking about it. Within a week, they too went to an agency and signed a contract to work for a family in Chicago, America. Chicago, America, Fiona yelped. Part of her was excited because she'd heard so much about America, but part of her was very sad, for she loved her little village. For the next weeks, it was hard for all of them. They had to decide what to take with them and what to leave behind. The last night they were home, Fiona and Eilish put a bowl of milk for the leprechauns and the wee people, the fairies, as they had done all their lives. Fiona, in America, servants have servants of their own. The streets are paved with gold and we shall live in a fancy house. If only we could take the wee people to America with us. Do you think we could? Eilish asked her sister. No, Eilish. I think the only place the wee ones can be happy is here, where the woodbine tweeneth, near the forest, here in Glencarry, Fiona whispered. The next morning, Fiona's mother and father bade tearful farewells to lifelong friends. After old Mr. Fitzgerald helped them load the last bundle on the wagon, the family climbed aboard. As they left their homestead and village, they all looked back as long as they could. When they crested the hill, their beloved village disappeared behind the groves of trees. Eilish and Fiona cried for miles. So did their mother. Their father just stared off into the distance. They traveled most of that night and part of the next day. When they arrived in Belfast, they made their way directly to the shipyard to board the steamer that was bound for America. As the ship pulled away from the docks, they took one last longing look at their beloved Ireland. Crossing the Atlantic was long and hard. Almost everyone aboard was seasick and miserable. To pass time, Fiona made lace, yards and yards of lace. Finally, they neared the harbor in New York. They could hardly wait to set foot on dry land. When they did, they barely had time to proceed, and then make their way directly to the train station to catch the train to Chicago. On the train, there were no bunks or cots to sleep in. They had to take turns sleeping on the hard seats of the coach car. At least on the ship, we had bunks to sleep in, Anne said wearily. Days passed. Fiona busied herself by making more and more lace. The journey was bumpy, hot, and dusty. They stopped at many towns and cities. Every so many stops, they brought bread and cheese. Finally, one day, the conductor announced that they were approaching Chicago. We're here, Eilish crowed happily. The train pulled through what seemed like miles and miles of stockyards full of cattle. They could see a big city, tall buildings off in the distance. I'm guessing the cattle are waiting to be slaughtered. The Americans eat well. I'll be bound. There must be a joint of beef on every table, their father sang out. Look, Mother, the sea is right next to Chicago. I wonder why the ship didn't bring us right here, Fiona said. That there is Lake Michigan, folks. And it sure does look big enough to be the ocean, don't it? The conductor said. At the depot in Chicago, there were drivers for hire with wagons to take travelers home. Fiona's father had the address of the rooming house and their employers had arranged. As they drove through the city, Fiona couldn't believe her eyes. Every building was grander than the last, row upon row of them. Elegant people were strolling with arms full of packages. Look at those lovely frocks, Anne sighed. Made with fine Irish lace, I'll wager, Father added. Is this where we are going to be a-livin'? Aish chirped excitedly. Our flat is on Deccan Street. Is that near here? Their father asked the driver. The driver smiled. No, sir. We have quite a ways to go, he answered. further they drove, the clearer it became that they were coming into a part of Chicago that wasn't so grand. The streets were crowded with sprookers selling their wares from wagons. The buildings and houses were shabby and run down. "This is it, 120 Deccan Street," the driver sang out. Then he helped them unload and lug their belongings up rickety stairs. "Yoo-hoo, Annie! It was Mrs. O'Flaherty, their neighbor from Glencarry. We work for the same family. They told us you were coming. I tidied up your flat and made your beds," she called out. "This must be a mistake, Mother. If you and Dad were working for fine rich folks, why would they be putting us up in a place like this?" Fiona whispered to her mother. Annie and the girls cleaned and swept while their father went for supplies. After a good scrubbing and after they covered the shabby old furniture with throws and quilt they'd brought, the 2-room flat was almost livable. They had never seen a place like it. The sink and dry kitchen were in one room, and the other room was crowded with 3 beds. Annie and Mrs. O'Flaherty worked as kitchen maids for the same family. It took them 3 trolley rides to get there each day. "I can't wait for our first pay packet. The girls will be needing new shoes when they start school," Annie whispered as she scrubbed the floor. "Pay packet?" Mrs. O'Flaherty scoffed. "Don't you know that you won't be getting pay for serving them? They paid your way here, so every penny that you would earn belongs to them until you repay them." "Remember, they're charging us rent for the rat trap we live in. They own it, and they'll be levying your uniform as well," Pert Haggerty, another maid, added. "But how will we live then?" Annie muttered. "You'll have to take second jobs and work in the evenings, darling. We all do, you know." That's sad. The other maids were quite right. Both Annie and Mick took second jobs. Mick at the slaughterhouse and Annie scrubbing laundry at a downtown hotel. But it wasn't long before Mrs. O'Flaherty told Annie about a posh dressmaker in the city. "They're looking to find Irish lace, and your Fiona makes the finest I've ever seen," Mrs. O'Flaherty crowed. Annie made an appointment and took Fiona to show her lace to the store buyers. Sure enough, they were heartily impressed. They made an offer on the spot to pay a pretty penny for Fiona's lace. "We'll buy as much as the girl can make." When Annie and Fiona got home and told Eilish and Father the news, they decided right then and there to have a party. "Now we'll be able to save money and buy our own home right here in America," Annie called out as she danced around the room. "I know just the place too. We'll be crossing that great sea called Michigan Lake, and we're going to buy land," Father sang out. "We'll have a sweet farm and maybe some sheep," Eilish cooed. "What is this place called where we'll be going, Dad?" Fiona asked. "Michigan," he crowed as he reached for his tin whistle. That evening, all their neighbors gathered and sang and danced, some of them even while holding pieces of Fiona's lace. "To Fiona!" they sang out as they whirred around the room. "This lass and her lace has saved the Hughes family," Mrs. O'Flaherty called out. "The Laird bless us all," Annie whispered. The celebration went on almost until the time for Mass the next morning. As the months passed, it wasn't long before the Hughes family had put away money in a tea tin on the high shelf in the kitchen. It was the month of October, and All Hallows Eve would be coming. One night before their father and mother left for their night jobs, Father sat down to tell them a story. "This is about the Puka, the ghostly black horse that is harnessed to the Costa Bower, the carriage of death. The banshee screeches and pounds on the door to collect souls that have passed from this life," Father said as he pretended to shiver. "I don't want the story, Dad. I want to hear about the tale of lace that you took to Mum again," Eilish insisted. "Darling, you know that one by heart." "I want to hear it too, Dad. I want to hear about Glencarry. I miss Ireland." Their father obliged them, and then he and their mother hugged Fiona and Eilish in for the night. "Remember, my precious lambs, keep the Sabbath, love the Lord. It's in your heart home resides, and it will remain there as long as you remember those you love," their mother whispered as they both slipped out the door. While Eilish slept, Fiona made lace for what seemed like hours. As she looked up to rest her eyes, she noticed a light glowing through the window. It was late. What could the light be? She heard shouting and people running about. Then there was a pounding on the door. "It's the Banshee coming for us!" Eilish screamed, waking from a deep sleep. Then they heard the voice call out, "Fire! There's fire! Run for your lives!" With that, Fiona dressed Eilish, pulled on their shawls, grabbed the tea tin and her bolt of lace, and ran for the door, pulling her crying sister. They all but tumbled down the rickety stairs and made for the alley. There were people everywhere running and screaming. As Fiona looked back and down the alley, she could see nothing but flames lapping in the sky. It was dark and smoky. Just then a clanging bell, neighing horses, and thundering hoofs rushed by them. "It's the Puka and the Coaster Bower!" Eilish shrieked. "No, Eilish, that's the fire wagon. They're coming to put down the fire," Fiona called as she pulled her sister along. "Where are Mom and Dad? Where are they? If our house burns down, how will they ever find us?" Eilish sobbed. Fiona didn't answer. They ran and ran until they tasted blood in the backs of their throats. "Where are we going, Fiona? Where?" Eilish panted. "We're doubling back to our house. The fire's already been there and won't be back," Fiona answered urgently. "How will Mom and Dad ever find us?" Eilish sobbed again. Fiona took out her bolt of lace. Her scissors were still around her neck. She pulled off some lace and started cutting it. "No, Fiona, your beautiful lace, your lovely lace!" Eilish screamed as she became hysterical. "Eilish, this is the only way. We'll leave a trail of my lace. That's how Mom and Dad will find us," Fiona said softly, trying to comfort her sister. Just as Fiona tied her last piece of lace to the doorway of a basement, she and Eilish crawled in. They huddled together for hours through the darkness of the night. From time to time, Fiona thought she heard voices, but then they'd get faint and disappear. At morning's light, Eilish started to cry again. "Mom and Dad should have found us by now. They should have," she insisted through her sobs. "The trail of lace will bring them right here to us. I know it, Eilish, I know it," Fiona tried to comfort her sister. "What if they perished in this awful fire? There's nothing left of Chicago, nothing!" Eilish sobbed even louder. It was exactly at that moment they heard a familiar voice. "My lambs, my wee lambs!" It was their mother. She and their father were both clutching pieces of sooty lace. "We've been looking for hours. We'd almost given up hope," their mother said as she held them close. "That's when we saw it. The first little glimmer of hope. Your lace, Fiona, your lace, tied to a lamppost," their father cried. "So we followed it. We followed each and every little bundle of it," their mother added. "And it brought us right to you, my darlings. Right here to you," Father said as tears rolled down his cheeks. "But, Mother, Fiona's lace is ruined. It's covered with smoke and soot," Eilish whispered. "No, darling. This is the most beautiful creation, soot and all. For it saved you both, and us as well," their mother cried as she held them close. "We and generations after us will cherish this lace, Fiona. Always, always," their father exclaimed. The end. I love you, Gwen. I love you, Sadie.